So greetings, and thank you much for coming to the talk. As you see, this talk is a little bit about where computer security can meet life and death for some people, actually a lot of people around the world. So this is one thought to begin with from the book 1984. We'll talk a little bit about a character named Winston Smith, and this guy, his job was to make sure that everything in the current and past was fitting with the government line. So when the government changed its policy, if the government had a new ally, if the government had to change its ration of chocolate for everybody, he would go back and he would change all the government forecasts. He would change the agricultural production statistics and all of that. So there's a lot to think about, I think, in these two lines. Just one more thought before we begin. You know, if you're in a situation where you feel like people aren't telling you the truth, and that what you're seeing on the news and hearing on the radio is not quite right, you can imagine how this would ring true as well, and you would perhaps spend your entire life actually searching for some part of the truth, which, as we'll see, I think probably applies to all of us, no matter where we are in the world. So Greetz from 101, that's the name of the presentation. Greetz, greetings, and 101 is was the room in 1984 where the bad people go, right, in order to be reprogrammed. I'm Kenneth Geers. I don't have a cool intro like Johnny does, but I guess I can say that I've been overseas a fair bit, including in some countries that are fairly authoritarian. And I've never been to a place that I didn't like, and I hope to go to many more places before it's all over. The book 1984 is very interesting. The government information warfare, I would say, against its own people, right? Constantly spinning the truth, constantly keeping the truth, perhaps from its people, and inventing stories to support its positions. They use technology in the novel, and so that's why, you could compare it to, thinking about the internet and where it's going for the future. And one of the things I'm going to say in the presentation is we don't really know the future. We don't know where we're going, and, it's really up to all of us to help shape the future and for the better. There's a Ministry of Truth that's in charge of lies, and there's a group called the Thought Police that's going to catch people who get too clever and make sure that they are retrained. So there's a technology in the novel in the form of two-way telescreens in and out of apartments and houses. And then there's room 101. So let me show you a short video clip from the beginning of the movie. So I'm not going to play spoiler for you, but it starts with an alarm clock.
To 40 group, take your places, please. Right. Let's see which one of us can touch his toes. Right over from the hips, brothers and sisters, please. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. Smith? 6079 Smith W. Yes, you. Bend lower. You're not trying. Watch me. There, brother. That's what I want. Anyone under 45 is perfectly capable of touching his toes. I'm 39 and I've had 4 children. We don't all have the privilege of fighting in the front line. Remember our boys on the Malabar front. Just think what they have to put up with.
So that's the victory sign, the sign that shows he's agrees with her and is ready to move on according to the party line. So now we're not in 1984, but we're in year 2007, and there's no question but that the internet is transforming all of our lives, and ever more so on a daily basis. We're going to talk a little about traditional media and how newspaper and the printing press and the radio and television is a lot different than what the internet is is and is becoming. Essentially, in this day and age, everyone has a printing press and a radio transmitter in your own room. And so governments, especially the ones we're going to talk about, are very conscious of that and are actively taking measures to limit the power of what you can do with a computer and an internet connection. You know, we could talk a little bit about stuff that Richard Clark talked about, the weaponization of the internet. In short, you know, soldiers say, you know, that their primary job is to kill people and break things. And I think we're getting very close to the internet being a weapon in and of itself. You see that the Air Force has created a cyber command just recently. And then criminal repression and pursuit we'll talk about. So let's say you're advising a despot, right? You're advising a dictator. My guess is probably one of the first things you should say to him is that you shouldn't trust the internet. There are various ways in which, if you're in control of an authoritarian regime, you want to keep control of the information space. There's some funny examples. In Turkmenistan, the guy actually started naming the months after members of his own family. Right? And so that is one way to do it. In Kyrgyzstan, we actually see the government actively running denial of service attacks when it doesn't like what it sees on the news. One of the things you can advise a leader to is that there is good reason for censorship. I mean, there's crime, right? There's bad people, there's crime. The thing is so the government is going to need to build some kind of a capability to chase criminals and to keep order. But the fact is, having that power in hand, it can use against its political adversaries. Now, among the tactics that you would recommend are that your leader could carry on a discussion with his or her people in an unaltered and direct fashion. And deny that to the adversaries. You would say that the internet can actually help in this regard, especially in one-party states, especially in authoritarian regimes that control everything. They control telecommunications. So they control DNS, they control the top-level domain, they control the routers and the switches, and they can route everything if they want into and out of a national-level proxy. It's very important, both in terms of surveilling the people and also manipulating traffic when so desired. Now, it's pretty simple. Cyber tactics, involve, reading packets. But you can also delete. You can black hole stuff you don't like, right? But then it gets ever more sophisticated and ever more sneaky in actually modifying packets to say different things. Whenever you see things, of course, you could call law enforcement. And then in cyberspace, there is even more plausible deniability than there is in the physical world. Because people don't readily have the ability to check, where the packets are coming from and whether they have been altered en route all the time. Now, in terms of international politics and human rights, we're going to look at the example of Zimbabwe. And in Zimbabwe, essentially, I was there in 1991, and it was called by most people that I met there the best country in Africa. Now it's generally thought to be the worst country in Africa. Now, the fact that one guy, through power politics, can do that in 15 years and still have the respect of a lot of people on the continent testifies to the fact that you have to be pretty terrible abuser of human rights before you need to sweat that it's going to affect your position as head of state. So with the internet, none of us really has access to the entire internet. And in the authoritarian countries where things are heavily filtered, you're actually going to see that you're going to see a tiny slice of the internet. You're going to see few true international sites. And the sites that are in the local language, that's key. The language where the people speak the local language, those are going to be heavily regulated, heavily taxed. You have to register and re-register and re-register. Now, going back to the issue of some countries needing or wanting censorship for cultural or political reasons, at least some countries, even though they're heavily censored, you find that they're a bit more open about it. And so at least the discussion then is on whether or not and at what level censorship should take place. There's a lot of challenges to filtering the internet. It's not easy. It's super complex. You're going to have political adversaries coming after you. You're going to have internal adversaries coming after you and external adversaries. And then keeping watch on something like the internet is just a ghastly task, as most people in here know. It's hard enough to watch your home network, much less an enterprise and much less a country. There's a couple of ways to filter internet traffic. We'll just talk about two in this presentation, but essentially, say a denial of sin. And this is not difficult to do because the dictionary is actually designed, has certain, it'll say vulgar next to certain words. And so those are words, you know a lot of them, but I think my mother is here, so I won't say any of them. But they're easy enough to go through, even for a programmer, and find these words and to deny their entry into the information space. The problem, though, is that a lot of words have more than one connotation, and so blacklists that are developed through keywords really need to be double-checked by real people. Otherwise, how in the world in, say, Saudi Arabia do you search for a good recipe on marinated chicken breasts? Right? It's not going to come up. Or if you have a contact in Middlesex County in England, that too is going to be in MapQuestable. Programming and politics. So words in context are a lot more difficult for computers to understand than single words by themselves that have a negative connotation associated with them. It's hard enough for people to understand when they read a political think piece or an op-ed column what the author is getting at. It's impossible for a computer. You really need a subject matter expert there who's expert in every facet of life within the country. And as you can imagine, in the internet era with so many billions of packets flying around every second, this is impossible. And especially in countries that are authoritarian, and as you get to the countries that are one-man show, it's not going to happen. So a despot, they're very difficult balance to make between, say, giving them enough information or too little information. A couple of strategies of blacklisting, and one example of that is, the two strings, royal family and corrupt, should never really appear in the same sentence, right, unless there's a not before the corrupt. And again, you should have subject matter experts verify all this to make sure. So a lot of them are going to go to whitelisting, right? And whitelisting is essentially saying you can go to these websites and no more. So I'm going to give you one page that has politics, one page that has sports, one page that has the weather, a little bit of pornography, and we're done, right? So in other words, you want to visit a site that I've never heard of before and the system hasn't seen before, it's going to be automatically denied. Now, I'll finish the presentation on the human factor. This is not the last slide I'm talking about later on. So we've talked a little about the supply side. So this is the demand side. You can actually affect the demand side greatly through intimidation, right? Whether that's physical or virtual. A lot of us will have a banner that pops up on the screen as you sit down to your computer reminding you that somebody out there may be watching. And security personnel, as far as what say a government would want to hire, traditional skills are no longer adequate. You're going to need people who are modern day law enforcement, modern day spies, modern day administrators. Kind of have 4 commandments here if you want to help a despot set up a network. Make sure that all accounts are officially registered, right? And that means for a particular user. And they've got one username and password. And all of the activity from that account should be directly attributable back to the account. Users can't share or sell connections, and they can't encrypt their communications, right? So you can be sure who's sitting behind the terminal at any given time, and then you have visibility on the traffic.